what Skinner figured out was that if people are rewarded for behavior, it's more likely to be repeated in the future. If people are punished for their behavior, it's less likely to be repeated. And that sounds like common sense, right? Yeah, Joel, obviously. But the way he found evidence for this was through experiments where he managed to teach what we would consider to be very basic animals like rats and pigeons. He taught them to climb ladders. He taught them to press levers. He even taught pigeons to know how to set off missiles in. I want to say it's one of the world wars, but there's a story about that. I'm not truly like well versed in that story, but apparently, yeah, they used operant conditioning. Essentially, he said that you could use reward and punishment or a combination of the two to make beings do and repeat any sort of behavior. Because his fundamental assumption was that behavior is due to our previous experience when interacting with the environment. So what I said in the video was, if we know that's the case, right, at least if we can say that that's pretty close to the truth in how our behavior is oriented, can we use that to our advantage, right? If you want to change your behavior patterns, can you make the thing you want to do more rewarding and the thing you don't want to do more punishing, right? And my point, I kind of linked to that, was, can you make doing something you don't want to do harder to do? Well, yes. And in the context of the video, I was talking about social media dependency and doom scrolling and that automatic compulsion of getting your phone out. Can you increase the friction, which is kind of decreasing the reward, increasing the punishment? Right? I said for using like a screen time blocker or having your phone in a different room or having notifications off, all of those things, right? And yes, that's not going to completely switch your behavior because you can go on the app without the notification, or you can go and get your phone from another room, or you can break into certain screen time blocking ways, right? But what I'm saying is it increases the friction. It makes it less likely to happen, because Skinner didn't say if something's rewarded, it's guaranteed to happen again. He just said it increases the probability. So
It's kind of like
if that's what you were...
it's kind of like you can manipulate yourself. I've heard of Pavlovian conditioning before, and that
Do you know what that is?
I know in the context of dogs, where dogs are given treats for doing good stuff.
So Pavlovian conditioning, or I know it is classical conditioning, is different to operant conditioning, which is Skinner's theory. So Pavlov basically trained dogs to salivate just from the sound of a bell. And the way he did that was every time food was on the way, he rang a bell. And over time, the dog learnt to associate the sound of the bell with food coming. So then, with the bell on its own, it began to salivate. And that's known as associative learning. In the same way, right, that you can think about it in a human sense. Let's say you're bitten by a dog when you're a kid. Right? The dog originally wouldn't bring you fear. What brings you fear is getting bitten, right? Pain from being bitten, the attack, right? But once in your brain you pair the dog with the pain, right? You associate those two stimuli. Eventually, right? If that learning is consolidated, you will just fear dogs because your brain automatically associates a dog with the potential pain and the fear of an attack.
Yeah,
If that
but
makes sense.
I wonder if there's like a lot of these associations that aren't actually real. Like, if there's probably a lot of things we associate with a particular emotion, and then we don't touch it. But didn't if we actually did it, then we'd realize it's not all that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of our fears in life. Because, I mean, yeah, there are some things that are dangerous, of course, but a lot of the time, that's the purpose of the anxiety system. The anxiety system is designed for you to get out or to not go into dangerous situations, which means that it will overcompensate, right, and protect you from going into situations that just could be dangerous. That's what social anxiety is, right? We've associated, potentially unconsciously, probably unconsciously, right? We've associated interacting with people in the social environment with danger. Like that could happen. Stranger danger is a real thing. There are creepy, weird people out there. But what we've done is that association then makes us anxious to interact with just people,
Yeah.
right?
Isn't social anxiety kind of bullshit then? Because like you're not going to be endangered like 99% of the time. Normal, if I go into uni campus, I'm not, my social anxiety is not there. It's not like doing its job. It's being like, I'm not, they're not scary once you, like, when you start talking to most people. So, like, surely
Well,
it's a bit like too much.
I have to develop my point by saying it's not just the fear of like harm, it's also the fear of ridicule. You don't want to be ostracized by the tribe. That's why you're also socially anxious. Because if you go up to a stranger and express yourself openly, they could laugh at you, they could insult you. That is also as painful. And we actually looked at this in my social psychology module that social rejection activates the same part of the brain as physical pain. It's a painful experience just on a psychological level. So that is also what social anxiety protects you from. It's ridicule.
Why would it be hurting the same place of the brain as physical?
I don't know why, but they've done brain scan studies and found that they did it where they set up like a fake computer game where it was where people it was like a how do I put this? Like imagine a video game scenario when you've got three people passing a ball between each other, right? And they're seeing it like individually. They're isolated playing this game, and the participants saw themselves as one of the three people. The study started with the three characters like passing the ball between each other equally, and then about halfway through the study, the two what they thought were other players playing in another room or wherever else, they just started passing between each other, and the participant wasn't getting past the ball in this video game environment, which was like a simulated version of social rejection. And they found that parts of the pain system in the brain, physical pain system, were activated.
So,
Interesting, very
so Joel,
interesting.
if you've got like a gig in 2 days and you're speaking in front of 100, 150 people, 150 children, I should be specific, because you're doing a talk to a
Mhm.
school, why isn't your brain being like overloaded by pain?
So that's a good question, man. That is a great question. I've done it before. So just like how when the rat is dropped in a new cage, it has to sniff every last inch of the cage to realize it's not going to die, right? It's experiencing the environment and realizing that it's not a threat. I've been in that environment before. I've sniffed around and I didn't die, right? I was nervous for my first school and my second school as well when we did those two back in April, but I've done it before, so I know what to expect. I know what to expect. And I know how to do a good job in theory. So basically, I have a good plan and I know that it's not going to go terribly. And also, speaking in front of kids is very different to speaking in front of adults. So I'm really going in there like you're not going to be able to. I'm not going to have to talk about ideas that stretch me. Like if I had to go and do a talk in front of adults, right, about psychology, philosophy, self improvement, whatever, how those things interact, I'd be a lot more nervous. But with kids, you just tell them stories. Like I know on Thursday, my plan is I'm going to do the usual spiel about what am I sat in? I'll be in my sports chair, and the kids have to try and figure out what it is, and I'll explain about my sport, and then I show them a video of me playing basketball, and then I talk about my disability and use an analogy that they'd understand, and then I'm going to just tell a story about Europeans. I'm just going to tell them the story about the final in the summer, and then I'll end it with a message like you always need to be ready to show your best in the world. So you always need to be prepared for the moment when life gives you an opportunity. Give them a little more message, and that's like 20 minutes. That's perfect. You know.
Um, on the rat point, where when rats enter a new environment, they have to sniff each side of the cage. Um, are are humans doing that in when they reach a new environment? Is it kind of like when they reach a new boundary when they're sort of hitting up against a fear?
Well, imagine this. I'll use a real life example, and then I'll explain my thought behind it. But remember, Jacob, the first time we went to record a podcast and you had to go and do the intro like 4 times because you were messing up midway through and you were nervous and it was a new experience. Right? You were a rat sniffing out the cage because you never done this before. The anxiety of, oh, people are going to listen to me. How do I articulate myself? How do you even start a podcast? Oh, I sound really weird. This isn't right? All of that. And then you've done it now. What episode are we on? What's this? Like 50 something?
65.
65, right? You've done it 65 times. So you sniffed a lot of that cage. You know you're not going to die. You sort of know what you're doing now. So there's less anxiety, right? And it's the same way. It seems like when we enter novel scenarios, anxiety, fear is like the base point. Because who knows what could happen, right? You could have posted that first podcast and people would have taken the piss out of you.
They did.
I could have thought you were a knobhead. Or like, just in like how the rat gets in the cage and there could be a cat somewhere. It has to sniff and find out where the cat is, if there is one, right? So you have to navigate your situation to try and find out where the threats could be, and then the anxiety diminishes, if that makes sense.
Do you reckon that's why like animals have such a good sense of smell and dogs are always sniffing around everywhere because they're trying to sense for danger?
Well, that's probably a bit more complicated than just saying they're doing it to find threats, but like human beings, a lot of it is about our best sense is our vision rather than our smell. So when we go into a social place, we'll be looking around. Is anyone taking the piss out of us? Is anyone insulting us? Is anyone looking threatening? Like we do that potentially. Well, it feels like we do that on an unconscious level. So
maybe we should use a different sense. Our eyes are deceiving.
They are. But I think the good message that we should take away is things are scary when they're new. But you just have to do a certain number of reps and they're not scary anymore. Like, even if it's the scariest possible thing you can imagine, take a bungee jump. The first bungee jump, your adrenaline is going to be through the roof, right? Your body doesn't know what a bungee jump is. Your body is seeing you throw yourself off a deathly drop, right? But do 100 bungee jumps, and on the 100th one, you probably won't be as scared as you were at the first. And whether it's bungee jumps or making YouTube videos or public speaking or going to the gym when you feel nervous to, like, things just need reps. And I'm not saying I have shit figured out. This is me like speaking notes to myself that I need to think about more. Just do more and you will feel less scared. It's like you have to endure a certain amount of discomfort to earn your not feel discomfort.
Well, public speaking is supposed to be probably the top fair, isn't it? Because it's just you're getting judged by so many people and you're just on your own alone.
I mean, social anxiety is something that like the majority of people.
It's worse
can
than
relate.
actual anxiety. Like,
would you
I reckon a lot of people would rather bungee jump than go on stage.
That's an interesting point. Would you rather do a bungee jump or would you rather go and do a talk in front of 10,000 people? I mean, that's a question to you.
I think for me, I'd do 10,000 people. That's more. Well, for me, that because I've skydived, bungee jumping won't be as bad. Like it won't be as bad. But I mean, because I think but say I haven't skydived before. I guess it's because of proof. So yeah, because I proved that I've skydived, then I can do a bungee jump. If I've proved that I've done 65 podcasts, and also we'll come to that talk with a certain amount to talk about, and I have like as it's kind of like how you're prepared as well. So preparation probably kills the nerves, and also like because that you have kind of like a baseline of stuff that you know, and then there's stuff you don't know as well, and you're still trying to figure out. So as long as you were able to majoritize a lot of the stuff that you know, like you do with the school, then I don't that might be a reason why it's not as bad.
Well, let's change it then and go, right, you can't prepare anything and you have to go up and try and make 10,000 people laugh.
Laughing would be struggle. That would struggle. I'd probably do a bungee jump then. Yeah, I don't know how to make people laugh on the spot.
No. Or even if you prepped for it, like I feel like stand-up comedy is like the pinnacle of social anxiety.
People are quite mean as well. Like they throw shit at you.
Mhm. I'll definitely do it at some point in my life just to experience it.
Do you reckon that's like a outward manifestation of I don't know, something they've got inside? The people that are like throwing shit at the comedians.
Hmm.
Why are they doing that?
Yeah, I mean, they get a certain people get a certain satisfaction from tearing people down, just like people in our Instagram comments or someone makes a snarky comment on you in real life. Like people get a little bit of satisfaction from that, don't they?
Yeah, I suppose it's the same thing. Um,
Hmm.
Also, like when you're kind of like speaking to the kids, is do you kind of like feel how they're taking it and like how they're responding to you and how maybe you kind of adapt onto them?
Well, this is an interesting topic because the first time we did a school, I had like slides prepared, you know what I mean, with pictures. I was going to tell my whole story through sport, and like I had an idea in my head of how it was going to go. And then I was with my mentor, a guy who'd done this before, right? Many times. And he went first. We were both doing like 20 minutes each of the 40-minute talk in the morning. And he went first. And I noticed through watching him immediately that my tone was off in how I was going to approach it. I was going to like talk like maybe I was talking to 15-year-olds or people our age, right? And the way he was performing, because that is the right word to use, I would say it was akin to children's TV presenter. And I was like, oh, okay, Joel, you're talking to children here. Like some of them could be, they're like 5, 6 years old. So they're not going to understand any big words you use. They don't give a shit about your theories about how the mind works. They don't care. They just want to have fun. Just ask them weird questions like, if you ever eaten broccoli before, and like put your hand up if you have, and then like all that kind of stuff. So I realized that that's how I try and be now. I imagine myself as a CBBS presenter, telling telling a story about wheelchair basketball. Genuinely, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, but
So
yeah, okay. I think it makes sense for that age range because my counterpoint would have been like, well, like college kids going to see Peterson talk and they don't know what half about what he says. But
no, but I would approach it very differently if I was going to a secondary school.
mm,
Like the second school we did, mate, they were a what they call an infant school. So the oldest kids were year two. So it was like 5, 6, 7, 8, or something like that, or 5, 6, and 7. So you can't really give them a true lesson about life. They don't, bruv. They just want to go home and like eat cheese.
they,
You know what I mean?
their
So you just give
consciousness
them a bit of time.
hasn't developed that far.
No. So just give them like my view then is like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to try and change their perception of disabled people, change their perception of disabled sport, and give them a sick day. Like they go home to their parents and go, guess who I saw today? Like, guess what I learned? Some kid in a wheelchair is playing basketball. How wild. You know?
That's
That's my approach.
interesting. You have an impact on the world where some kids go home to their parents saying, "I met Joel Clifton today."
I mean, they might not even remember. I don't even care if they remember my name. What I want them to say was, I saw a guy in a wheelchair playing basketball and it was cool. You know? That rather than, because I feel like there's the majority of people, unless they're educated or shown, will just perceive disabled people as very limited or very like unable to do the things that normal people would do or don't live cool lives. They just exist. Whereas I want to show them that like, no, we're doing cool shit as well. Break those boundaries, you know?
We this is good. Like you're actually like changing the world. You're actually having a positive
Yeah.
impact. Like you're helping the generation's perception and where they're kind of most vulnerable in how they view things.
Mate, the amount of joy I got when we left our first school and we're like driving out of the school car park and the amount of kids that we spoke to that day just waving at us and like nudging their dad and like pointing at our car and waving and smiling.
Wow. That's a great
Yeah, bruv,
response.
because you think their day in primary school is just like, right, you do a bit of maths, you do a bit of English. You know, you go out in the playground. It's have your assembly in the morning where the teacher tries to tell you something. It's like that's every day. Every day's the same, really. So then you get like a crippled athlete coming along, tells a story about wheelchair basketball, and then we do PE sessions throughout the day with them, where I tell them about my sport and we teach them a few skills and stuff. And if you make it fun, like we did loads of competitions. So we do like a passing competition, and then the winner would get like everyone would have to clap for them and that. Like for a kid, when you're 6, if you're like singled out in your class as doing something good and your whole class is cheering you on and clapping, that's like the best day of your life, you know?
And you're calling the teachers weasels at the same time.
Oh, that made it's hilarious. I'll get the teachers like we got the teachers involved last time. I would use the teacher for the demonstration, like pass how to do passing and stuff, and like yeah, it was
But you
funny.
you actually said like uh, teachers aren't the happiest people.
No, that was another weird insight that I got from doing this job was primary school staff rooms are an interesting environment. You know, like just the energy of some people there. I'm just like they just don't enjoy what they're doing, and people they say things like, "No, we'll never like gossip about students in the classroom." Oh no, they do. You know, talking about this and that about some students, and I don't know. It was an interesting dynamic to be in. So,
It's a bit unfair.
well, is it though, or is it just life? Like that's just
Yeah,
people. It's human nature. But yeah,
I mean a teacher's quite like it's a job with a lot of responsibility that you have on another person's life growing up, but um, it's it's maybe a bit like maybe a bit exploited from like the top down, and also there's just so much alternative education that might take over, might not. Everyone's like knowing where to educate yourself and how, like that's a it's a decision you got to make. um you kind of your choice of information, it's like there's lots of lots of ways it can go, and you just have to kind of pick the role model that you like to take it from.
I think what depresses me, and I'm not blaming anyone in this situation. I'm just speaking about what I observed. Was it's obvious that all of these teachers had a great intention when they entered into the job of like, I like working with kids. I want to give them a fun time. I want to teach them things. I want to help them learn about the world, affect young lives. Like that's all great. And then just the bullshit and dreariness of mundane existence sets in. Every day you have to tell that one kid to shut the fuck up, right? Every day you're talking about the same basic maths and English skills. Every day you have to come in at a certain time and you drink your coffee because you didn't sleep well last night and you're there until 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. marking tests, right? Where you're marking the same answers, the same questions. I feel like that bears down on them until the job is just a job. It's no longer, okay, how do I positively affect kids' lives? It's right, how do I get through from 9 until 3 p.m. and then go home? And you can feel that energy in some
It
teachers.
prob
I'm just going to say this. Like, I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm saying this is my experience. But the classes would come in for a PE lesson, and like you could tell there were teachers that didn't like their kids. I'm not saying you have to like every single one of your students, right? Some students are going to be more difficult to handle, of course. But I could just see a background rage behind some teachers, whereas others were very light and cheerful and they joined in, right? I remember one particular lady, she was amazing. She got involved, she was playing with the kids, she was smiling, she was laughing. That was the energy that I think teachers wish they could apply all the time, but it's tough. Like I'm not, I want to caveat, I'm not criticizing whatsoever. I'm just because I think I understand in a lot of contexts in life that happens. You come in with intentions to go and change the world, and and do really positive things, and then just life grinds you down. You know.
I think it's just because it's the same stuff every day. That'd be the hardest
Mm.
part. Like, how can you do the same thing every day for 50 years?
Mm. You have to love. You have to find what you love. I mean, that's why I love Charles Bukowski's quote where he says, "Find what you love and let it kill you." Find the thing that you would do every day for the rest of your life. You know.
Yeah, I think it's the same. Yeah, I think the point on is probably the same for a lot of jobs is important. You go in as an outsider and you don't know much, and then you kind of it gets repetitive, but you only
Mm.
have a certain accumulation of skills, and you want to be resourceful. So this is the path that you choose, and then you kind of weave yourself in and out the same similar sort of roles and see if it gets better or not. But um, it's not motivating. It's maybe they get motivated by a paycheck, but that only gets you so far. And I think a big part of it is the people that you work with, but the actual role itself. I think I just don't like the point of like it being repetitive. You'd have to I'd need to have sort of levels to the game at least.
Mm. Well, that's because you're a very progress-oriented guy. You get a lot of your meaning in life from making progress and stuff.
So not everyone's interested in progress.
Not necessarily, no. I think there's also a certain peace you can find in happily coasting. Like you find a position you like to be in, you like your hobbies, and like not everyone has to be elite at things, Jacob. You know.
I suppose the hobby part, yeah. If you get it from elsewhere, but then I would just turn a hobby into it's probably
Because that's how you're wired, mate.
it's
That's how
easier
you're
said than
wired.
done as well.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Shall I go into my main point that I've got from
Yeah,
today? If your points rounded up for you. So on Saturday, I went to Costa in Maidenhead. Right. I went early. I was going to meet my mum at some point in the day, but I went early because the sat nav said it was going to take half an hour longer if I went later in the day. So I go to this Costa. Right. I get an iced Americano. I feel like I've progressed in my caffeine pursuits in the fact that I don't have coffee with milk in it when I go out now. Like just black coffee with ice, please, Brev. You know what I mean? Anyway, have my iced Americano. I was planning on working on a video edit. Then I look in my bag, got no headphones. That's not ideal. Can't edit in a public, loud coffee shop if you got no headphones. You know what I mean? So I'm like, shit, what am I going to do now? Like, I had a notepad and some pens on my MacBook, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to write. I'm just going to ingest this caffeine and see what comes out of my brain. That's what I did. And 2 hours later, I'd written 4 full pages of just waffle, bruv. But like good waffle, like deep waffle. And that's why I sent. That's why I sent you that video idea of like. I feel like in that 2 hour period, I just brain dumped like the best, most inclusive theory that puts together bits of what I've learned over the past 3 years, 4 years maybe, into like one theory about how you should look at the world, and then potential solutions and actions and mindsets that would benefit you through looking at the world that way, if that makes sense. And maybe I've alluded to it before, but this will be good practice for me because I think I'm going to make like a 45+ minute long video about this. But I'm going to try and maybe articulate a little bit on the podcast and then see what your thoughts are and go from there, because I like using the podcast as a playground for ideas. So I've actually got my notepad in my bag and I will get it out in case I need it to supplement this, right? But essentially, something I struggle with is I look around the world when I'm out and about and I struggle with the amount of life that I see on a surface level but know nothing about. And what I mean by that is I see people in public, maybe I just glance at them, maybe there's a small interaction, maybe I just see them across the way. But these are all independent lives, living out their own story, right? With their own relationships, their own emotions, their own goals, their own failures, their own traumas. They're all individual people. And there's so much life, so much noise of life going on around me. And it's quite overwhelming at times. And I know that sounds quite abstract and weird, but that's how it feels. I get overwhelmed with the amount of complexity out there in the world. And then I asked myself, I actually wrote this specific thing, which I think when I'm writing, it's not necessarily me choosing what I'm writing. I just see the pen, the paper, and see what comes through my brain. It's like, from Stephen Pressfield's perspective, I'm like tempting the muse into just seeing what she gives me to write. And I wrote this: I find it challenging to contend with the weight of existence, right, on the world, of everyone's existence. And I also then wrote about that on a surface, on an individual level, sorry. And I said this, I said, what does that actually mean? Well, it might mean the mass of lives I see the surface level of when I navigate the world. How everyone has an independent experience and story filled with detail and complexity that I know nothing about. But what I said this, and this is the most interesting part, is I said, I only bear witness to the surface image of how they've contended with the weight of their own existence. This could be the multiple bags under their eyes, their posture, their physique, the gait of their walk, the gaze they lay upon the world, the way they interact with strangers and their relatives, and their public displays of addiction. If you can stop and notice, all around you, there are signs of how people are trying to cope with the weight of their existence. Now, this is all sounding quite abstract, but then I went on later and I said, okay, Joel, let's define our terms here because this sounded quite wishy-washy. What do you mean by the weight of existence? And I stared at that question for a good 5 minutes. And what I came to was I said, it's the weight of potential psychological and spiritual decline that hangs behind your whole life. And that's because you are a finite being in an infinite universe, right? You, in a life you didn't choose, in a world you didn't choose, there are uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that arise spontaneously within you that seem to be out of your control. And you aren't shown what path to go down. You're just thrown into life. And it's no wonder that we contend with serious difficulty psychologically because of that. And the thing that I find baffling is that not as many people notice this, and that we don't all just crumble under this fact. Right? How are we all sane? If you think about it on a deep level, bro, we are just thrust into that life in the world we live with, the parents we have, in the place on the earth we are, with our apparent name, and then we develop personality traits and we go out into the world and have to build social relationships, while at the same time we're dealing with our inner experience, with our thoughts and our feelings and our anxieties and our fears and our pains. And all of that builds up, and it's this big weight that I think bears down on everyone. And how you survive in life is you need a way to be strong and cope with that weight hanging down on you. Now, I might sound like a crazy man just ranting, but I'll stop there. I do have other thoughts on sort of like what I think helps you deal with this weight. But if you have any thoughts now, go, because I don't want to just ramble for like 10 minutes.
It's a deep idea. Because you can't see it, but you can. I like that point. When you stop and look around, you see the weight that everyone's carrying, and then it reminds me of angels fly because they take themselves lightly. So it's kind of, you have noise attacking you from all sides, like just the way that all these thoughts that crumble into your head that you can't control, that other people are controlling for you, that have been constructed to make you think in certain ways, and then you have to try and keep that same part of yourself separate from everything that's you're unconsciously consuming, and
Mm,
that's it's this constant noise until it builds up, and
mm.
it's the plethora of the the plethora of life, and um yeah, what's the solution?
Well, let me add another point that I maybe didn't stress enough or forgot to say, which is one thing that means that there's this weight to our existence is because objectively our lives are insignificant. We are 1 in 8 billion on a flying rock that's burning from the inside in an infinite universe. When it comes to the life of the Earth, our experience is just a blink in time. And we are destined to die. We are mortal beings. And our only biological purpose is to reproduce, pass on our genes. We are just like marionette puppets of our own genes, right? That is on an objective level what reality appears to be. But the contrast comes with the fact that life feels significant. We feel like we don't feel like we're 1 in 8 billion and that we're on this floating rock in space. We feel like an individual with a story to live out and a story to tell. There's a narrative going on here. That's how life feels. And it's the fact that human beings are aware that objectively they're nothing, but subjectively everything seems to connect and be worth something and have value and matter. It's that contradiction that means life has weight to it.
Yeah,
Because we're different from animals in that way. We have a certain level of psychological wakefulness that's different, right? I don't think birds in the trees have to feel like their life means something. They're just in it. They're just doing it. They're being. They don't have real like articulated thoughts like we do. They are almost they are enlightened in a way because they don't have this pain of like the pain of life being so meaningless but meaningful at the same time. Birds just fly around, find food, you know what I mean, reproduce, stay away from danger. Whereas us, it's like, God, we're aware of how small we are, and yet everything feels so big. And that's what the weight of our existence is. And you're right in the way that I think I've talked about it before in the way that everyone's addicted to something because of demons in their mind and things like that. But now I'm changing it to I think everyone has to find something to hold themselves up under the weight of their own existence. Whether that is an addiction to building muscle in the gym or being overly healthy, right? It doesn't necessarily just have to be what we consider to be negative addictions like cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, fast food, right? People can be addicted to anything. Maybe I'm addicted to going into deep ideas, but for a moment, for time, it takes me away from the fact that my insignificance is crushing down on me. It kind of makes me feel like my life matters. That's what meaning is. So, do you have any more
yeah.
thoughts before I go into the
I
notes I made
think
on solution?
on the point that we're 1 in 8 billion people, that is kind of like the overwhelming complexity is too much knowledge, kind of, and therefore with animals, they're living in ignorance is bliss, and I think when knowledge comes, maybe problems come as well, and
Mm,
the weight sort of seems like problems that have piled up, and therefore we try and overcome that weight to take the problems off, but then it's constantly rebuilding, and it's kind of like a problem cycle. One problem solved, there's another problem's fixed. Animals don't have to deal with that, and I think so. Without knowing your idea for the solution, mine would be like either the spirituality or trying to overcome the weight. That'd be the abstract
okay.
thoughts, yeah.
First thing is, I've just had a notification that your battery's less than 20%. So do you want to plug your MacBook in so we don't have this cut off?
No,
Although
it's
that's
alright.
your
It's
phone.
18.
Okay. So the thing is interesting, right? Is animals, like you say, they don't have that knowledge. They're living in bliss, and it's because they don't they don't experience existential pain because they don't know of their true physical predicament. Whereas for some reason, human beings have become conscious to
What
that.
do you mean by
And it hurts.
existential pain?
That's a great question, and you can tell that obviously these ideas are still infantile in my brain, and I'll develop them. What do I mean by existential pain? We have to find our own meaning, and that's painful because you might spend your whole life desperately searching for something to make your life feel worth doing, and the absence of that is painful. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, damn. We have to. Yeah, we have to. That's so true. Like that's so true. That's a really good
Like
point.
animals that you see in the wild don't need a reason to exist. Their reason to exist is to just
No, that
exist.
no, because like we're all trying to find like a reason. We're trying to validate our existence. We're trying to find a way that explains why we should exist.
And that could be becoming a public figure and doing charity work and being in movies or being a poet or whatever. Or it could be I'm an alcoholic and I'm in Weatherspoons from 10 a.m. till 1 a.m. And that's how I quieten the voices in the head. Because at least it numbs that feeling. Like, I think you even make your life meaningful or you slowly get crushed under this weight of nihilism and meaninglessness. And it's tough, man. Because I think I'm cursed with the fact that I'm aware of this. Like when I'm 14, I'm not thinking about this shit, bro. When I'm 14, I just want to play Fortnite. But now that I've become awake to something that to me feels very significant in terms of how it affects my approach to the world and my thought processes, I have to dig deeper into it and figure it out. So I'll tell you my few thoughts. There's a lot to this, so we can take this in dribs and drabs and bounce off bits. But my favorite point in terms of, I literally asked myself the question on the bit of paper. So what are potential solutions, Joel? With a question mark. And I just let myself simmer on that question. But the first thing I wrote was this. In physics, Isaac Newton found this law that every force has an equal and opposite force. So when I put my fist on the table like this, yes, there's a force of my fist acting on the table, but there's also an equal opposite force of the table acting back on my hand. I know that sounds paradoxical, but that's a law of physics, right? And then the idea arose within me of, okay, we've got the weight of existential pain, the weight of our existence crushing down on us, but where's the equal and opposite force? What is that? And if there is something like that, what is it? How can we harness it? And then I thought, I think it's something to do with the sublime. You know, when you're confronted in your life with moments of beauty and harmony and joy and peace that are so all encompassing that it's almost like the weight of your existence is lifted,
What does sublime
or you're
mean, by
strong
the
enough.
way?
I will get
Okay.
into that. It's almost like the weight of your existence is lifted and you're strong enough to bear it. What is the sublime? Okay, so when I was visiting you and we went down to the docks that evening and we lay on the grass and we looked at the stars. A very easy to recognize everyday example of the sublime is how you feel when you look at the night sky. The night sky confronts you with your significance, but it's so beautiful and almost awe-inspiring, and it's like terrifyingly beautiful that it's such a deep experience that it makes all the difficulty you go through as a person worth enduring to witness it. Same thing with a sunset. A sunset is a great example of the sublime. It's like you could have the hardest day of your life, physical pain, psychological pain, everything could fall apart. But if you saw a beautiful sunset, for a moment you would still be transfixed by it. Now, the sublime is a term that I've got from my study of romantic poetry in school. And what it was to the romantic poets was when you confront a force of nature that is so profound, so beautiful, so awe-inspiring, you are struck with this transcendental terror and joy at the same time. It's like you're hit with beauty and your own insignificance in one hit. And it lifts the weight of existence when you are truly in the face of something sublime. And I think in our modern world, we have lost our sense of the sublime, right? We busy ourselves with the tasks and duties of the day, of ticking off to-do lists. Well, you're back now. Was that a battery issue or are you good? Okay. We busy ourselves with the tasks and duties of the day, ticking off to-do lists, going through the usual motions we need to. And I don't think we stop enough to kind of evaluate the transcendental beauty around us. And I was thinking about it when I was in the coffee shop. It doesn't have to be grand things like a sunset or a starry night. When I was writing, I lifted my head from time to time and I took a moment to observe a father with his daughter having breakfast in Costa, and the way he was smiling and the way she was laughing, and they were enjoying their time together. Now, if you look at that on a surface level, it's just a dad and their daughter having breakfast, fine. If you want to look at it that way, that's cool. But to me, there's something deeply sublime in that. He could be estranged from her mum, right? That could be the weekend when she gets to see her dad and they're spending that quality time together, and therefore there's depth in that situation. Or it could just be the depth of a father's love to his daughter. And I think it's kind of like the idea from The Way of Zen by Alan Watts, where there's this unspeakable world where you don't try and use words and definitions and categorizations to describe your experience. You look at parts of reality in their totality without having to evaluate it, and everything then has this beauty and this depth that is so joyous and positive that it either lifts the weight of your existence or it makes it worth enduring. Because just being in contact with that beauty makes it worth the sort of pain of having to be a human in the world. I know it sounds like I'm waffling a lot, but all these thoughts were hitting me in this random Costa, and I'm going to go for it more as weeks go by. But tell me what you're thinking so far. Okay. Mm, 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 mm. I saw this video of this elderly guy talking about his life and his sort of advice, and he had this very light and peaceful aura about him. And he said that he used to be quite successful in a certain industry. I want to say it was the music industry, but I can't quite remember now. But basically, when he was in his height of wealth and status, he said he got robbed and everything was robbed from him, his possessions, his riches. And it was the best thing that ever happened to him. And the reason I'm telling you that story is because his main message was he wants his life to be filled with as many real things as possible. And what he classified that as was not material possessions. Real to him was the hug with his children, the sound of the birds in the trees, the feeling of water on your skin when you're bathing, the taste of a nutritious meal. They're the things that are real. And from hearing him say that, I kind of put two and two together and went, he just wants to connect with the sublime in his day to day life. And there's something that the material world leaves out, and it doesn't quite tap into that sublime nature of things. Like, if I showed you a picture of a sunset, you wouldn't feel the same way as if you actually saw that sunset yourself. And that kind of links to your point about fake beauty. We've tried to create an image of what is beautiful rather than just stopping and noticing the beauty that's actually around us. But to do that, you need a certain clarity of mind. You need to be somewhat at peace with who you are and what you're doing. You can't be full of anxieties and fears and pain. It's almost like for a moment, I experienced the world from what it is, not just from Joel Clifton's perspective. You know? Well, our whole experience is painted by our own expectations and our perceptions, isn't it? Like, if I was. Let's take the father and daughter scenario. I could be watching them, and from Joel Clifton's perspective, I could be saying, they're making loads of noise, they're distracting me from writing. Or I could get annoyed about the fact that, he's feeding his daughter a cookie on a Saturday morning. It's more like maybe Joel Clifton's perspective is the wrong way of thinking about it. Maybe the right way of thinking about it is, can you find the deep beauty in a situation? Because yes, he's giving her a sugar on Saturday morning, and yes, she's making a bit of noise, laughing really hard at the things he's saying. But it's like, well, what's at the core of that situation? Well, the core of that situation is love. Unconditional love between two people. And I could feel that. And that's why it brought me so much joy. Mm. It's like that line from Fight Club where he said, "What you own eventually owns you." Maybe it's a distraction. Everything's a distraction from connecting to ourselves, and that's why monks become ascetic and get rid of all their material possessions and meditate for 10 hours a day. And you know, there's something to this. There might be people listening that find this absolute bollocks, but in my heart, in my core, in my soul, I feel like this matters. Um, because there is like two forces in the universe. There's the one that grinds you down and confronts you with difficulty, and it's the one you have to navigate through and fight. But there's also another force. There's a force of joy and of beauty and transcendence. It's like when I was in Sardinia, I spent many hours staring, watching the sun go down, or staring at the night sky because the night was so clear and it was warm enough that you could be outside very comfortably. And when I went to Sardinia, it was just off the back of Europeans, finishing my first year of university. And that time, I was picking up a lot of psychological weight from feeling misunderstood in a university environment to battling with a difficult tournament physically and psychologically. And all that noise and that weight had held on to me. I was carrying it. My sleep wasn't in a good place. I wasn't intellectually where I'd want to be. And I was just a bit worn down by existence. And the hours that I spent under the stars or watching the sun go down in Sardinia lifted me from that weight. It kind of reminded me, it was like a hug from the universe, a sublime hug from the universe that patted me on the back and told me, "You're doing all right, Joel. Like, life is beautiful. Focus on that, not on the noise." I think it fights back against it, or it lifts it off you. It lifts it off you, or something can be so beautiful that you'd be willing to go through discomfort to experience it. It's a great question. I think, I think, yeah, the majority of difficulty we face in our inner experience is our own making because it's due to the ways that we've responded to the world. Yes, there are clear examples of times when people have been exploited and abused where there's no way of you can think or mindset or growth mindset your way out of that. No, no, no. There are problems in the world that people face, of course. But I think a certain amount of the noise and the stress and the garbage energy that you just pick up from being a person can be lifted. But once you do that, through confronting the sublime, through having a psychedelic experience, or just from having a hug with your mum, right? There's still this background weight that then begins to accumulate and accumulate again, due to the points that I made earlier on that you're a finite being in an infinite universe. You're struck with the fact that objectively your life is insignificant and yet it feels like it's important. All of those points are always going to be there, and you're always going to have to contend with the meaning problem in your life. But there are ways you can lift yourself from it for a certain period of time. Yeah, the TLDR is life is hard, but find things that give you enough joy and meaning that enduring the hard is worth it. You know, if I was to really summarize it, that's what I mean. And your point about responsibility is interesting. Like, yes, it means you're bearing more weight, but it's almost like you don't want to take off the weight of your own existence. You want to become so strong that you can bear it and do something positive with it. It's like Freud said that the purpose of therapy was not to alleviate people's suffering or bad feelings. He said the purpose of therapy was to rid people of their unnecessary suffering so that they could be strong enough to deal with the inevitable suffering of their lives. If you think about it that way, you're going to encounter a inevitable amount of difficulty. So why try and hide from pain? It's something we talked about in the card of the day, right? You can't avoid suffering. You just have to make yourself, you have to kind of choose it and make yourself strong enough to take it on. Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think this is a point that we'll come back to, and I'm going to develop as time goes on. But it was wild, man. It was a wild 2 hours of just writing in Costa, and I feel like there was some divine intervention in that. I never forget my headphones. So why did I forget my headphones that day? I was supposed to sit down and write in that way. We'll see. I'll wait until the universe makes me forget them again. But yeah, man, it's just there's a lot to this. Well, the caffeine high helps with that a lot, you know. But I'm pretty much ready to wrap up there, man. I feel like that was a lot of density. Hey man, that's how it goes sometimes. You know what I mean? Sometimes I show up to podcasts with no thoughts. Sometimes I don't even know the guest's name until they pop up on the call. So no pop, shirtless Don arriving in my Zoom. What life?